My name is Andrew Louis. I want to introduce you to Raylana Anderson, is the owner and founder of Anderson Consulting. She is a astute person in the area of HR, specifically in performance culture, specifically in understanding and building and growing strong and resilient companies. She's also the key contributor to the Wall Street Journal, CFO, Kiplinger, and other online media sites. So I want to introduce you to Raylana, really a specialist and gem for the Greater Peoria region in HR. Raylana.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Andrew. I'm going to go through the motions here of getting the presentation up on the screen. As Andrew said, we're going to talk a little bit about you being able to find and keep the employees that you want to keep your business working. And a lot of times we don't think about, okay, let's back up. And that's what I want to do here. Why is it important to talk about who you hire? You'll read a lot of research that says that your who decisions, who works for you, who you bring into your organization, are even more important sometimes than the what you do and the how you do it. So in a study that you see on the screen here, a summary of toxic workers that was done and published by the Harvard Business School, even if you hire a superstar in the top 1% of performance, you might make your organization about $5,000 on average in this study. But if you avoid, through good selection practices, hiring a toxic worker, you can actually improve your organizational performance on average by about $12,000, more than double the value to your organization, if you will, of focusing on hiring that superstar task-based performer. So we're going to talk today about structured selection, how to find the employees who can help you promote and advocate your culture, the culture advocates, and we'll come back to that. So think about your staff quickly, people that you work around and with, super quickly. If you could make any change without repercussions right now, how many of them would you gladly keep and retain in your organization? All of them? Or less than all of them? Would you hire every one of them again today? And what if they quit today? How would that make you feel? Anybody thinking if there were one or two that quit, you would be relieved? What's missing? What happened there? Now think about your business's mission and values, the reason that the business exists, why the organization does what it does. Quickly, what regular, happen all the time, workplace behaviors demonstrate those values? What do employees do that show the mission and values of the organization? And how frequently in the last couple of days or in recent memory have you seen those behaviors in the workplace? Who demonstrated them? How was it demonstrated? What reward, or worse, on the other side, what criticism did employees get if they were the ones who demonstrated the value and it may be conflicted with a momentary money-based change? Okay, we're going to talk about culture. Need to define it. Culture is simply behavior. It's how we do things here. What our values and our mission look like every day in every interaction with every person. The 2-foot level, if you will, not that 10,000-foot level that we often focus on and need to focus on in strategy development, but the 2-foot level. Thinking about culture and the idea that culture is behavior, the experiences that your employees have in the workplace, what people say and how it's received, what people do and how it's responded to, create beliefs in those employees about how we do things around here. If, for example, the experience is people standing around in the morning when we could at the coffee pot, or who are at the beginning of a meeting before it officially begins on video. People who hear nitpicking and criticism and backstabbing with no repercussions start to believe that's how things are done around here. That's the acceptable behavior. Is that really what you want? On the other hand, if people experience great feedback, gosh, I really like the way that you made that presentation the other day. Gee, I really appreciate that you bent over backwards to help me with that presentation and get it done. Gosh, I saw the way you handled that tough customer the other day. You did great. That's how we want our customers to be treated. Those become the beliefs that employees have about the organization and how we do things around here. And those then are the actions that get repeated. That creates the culture that you want. Now, you've got a culture in your organization. Hopefully, it's the one that you intend to have, the one that you reward and foster, and not the one that just sort of happened because you weren't paying attention. So what is culture advocacy? Broadly, it means first things come first. First, you define your organizational values, those that are based in your mission. You pick 4 or 6 to focus on. It's probably doable. More than that, could be tough to focus and really make change if change needs to be made, or to reinforce and keep things in line. It means in culture advocacy that mission is king, if you will, or queen. Not the person, the boss, the founder, or the position, the president, the vice president, the operations manager. But the mission is king. The mission is how we'll determine as a group and as an organization what behavior is appropriate, what decisions make sense. So those outcomes, those decisions become based on mission, not on person or position. That's culture advocacy. Competencies that build that become part of the way that we do it, become part of the way that we help people develop, and become attached to the organization. So if that's culture advocacy, think about your population. Think about your employees, your teams. Who are your culture advocates? Can you find more of those people through your selection practices, through your interviewing? Think about it. It's really easy in this green space where values-based behaviors, the way I want people to behave in my organization, the mission-driven behaviors that I want to support and advocate among my people on this axis. The skills, the hard skills, the way things get done. Great, and the classic is a great salesperson or a great manager. Boy, they get results, but in box 4, they really treat people harshly. Would you hire that person again, or would you really rather hire a person who had, in this green box, values-based behaviors, mission-driven actions that were strongly positive and high skills? Yeah, sure you would. Box number 4, you might not. You might see this red and think, wow, low value-based behaviors, they're really kind of mean-spirited or toxic, as we saw in the early slide, and they really don't have great skills. Easy no. But what about boxes 2 and 3? Mission-driven decision-making, culture advocacy will help you make decisions about someone whose values-based behaviors are strong, but whose skills need to be developed, whose hard skills may need work. Or it may help you make decisions about people whose skills are really strong, they can push hard on sales, and their values-based behaviors, their culture advocacy is a little low. So think about, these boxes. It's kind of a classic 4-square grid. If you could infuse your team members with 3 qualities. Pick 3. What would they be? What behaviors would demonstrate those qualities? And then figure out how to find it. So before you conduct the first interview, before you put an ad in an online source or start spreading the word among your employee team to get good referrals, think about what you want. Think about standards and make them clear. Standards help you figure out what to agree on. So if you picked one of those key qualities, and let's say that was customer service, figure out what the standards are. What behaviors demonstrate the customer service way that things are done in your organization? Be as specific as you can be, because without standards, if there is more than one interviewer, each of them has their own idea about what the standard is. So when the interview does eventually occur, there are differences in how that behavior is going to be evaluated, how that interviewee will be evaluated. Find the standards, define the standards. What specifically does that quality that you're seeking look like? Figure out what the best questions are to ask in an interview. Write them down, parse them out, talk about them. Really narrow among the interviewers who will be doing the interviewing what the best questions are to solicit the kinds of behaviors that you want to talk about and want your interviewees to talk about. Even more important, maybe, is find out and define what you believe as an interview team, what the best answers are. As an example, if you're interviewing someone in customer service is the quality that you have defined, and one of the things that you've got described as a standard is not criticizing the customer. And the question is, talk to me about a situation where you had a tough customer and how you handled it. One of the things that a potential employee might say is, well, so-and-so customer came to me and was all over with questions and problems they were having with the product. And I responded by saying, well, first, you're thinking about it all wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Is that really the kind of behavior that works in your organization or that demonstrates the standard of customer service that you want? So you've got best questions that get you to the qualities that you want to find, best answers so that you have a way to evaluate your interviews, really spend some time on training, on selecting the best interviewers, the people who will represent your organization and who will do a good job of interviewing, which is not an easy thing to do. It's not a natural talent. It's learned and it can be improved. So conducting the interviews always should be structured. You need to follow those best questions. You need to take time to focus on what you're trying to look for, the qualities that you've determined, and then target those things that you've identified as important. Use your team if you've got a team of interviewers, and don't let any interviewer talk too much. Way too often, interviewees leave an interview frustrated because they didn't get to answer the question. Or the interviewers are frustrated because, at the end of the day, at the end of the interview, they didn't really get the answers that they needed because they didn't let the interviewee talk enough. Ask the question and wait. Silence is okay in an interview. Yes, even in a video interview. Just takes a little practice and getting used to. So don't let the interviewers talk too much. Don't let interviewers sell too early. We can get to the point where, golly, we really know what we want and we're really excited. We've met this person, we like them. And so we start to talk about how great it is to work here and how wonderful it's going to be when the person's in, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't really done the work of conducting the interview. Last caution is leading the interviewee. So, Susie, glad that you're here today. We really are excited about talking with you. One of the most important things that we've determined is good for us is good quality customer service. We like people who know how to talk to customers. So, Susie, tell me, do you know how to talk to customers? Well, of course, Susie's going to say yes. And that is an extreme example, but it can happen subtly. Again, focus on what your standards are, what the best questions are to solicit that information, and what the best responses are. Because in the end, you're going to have to take notes. If you're an interviewer, you need to take notes. Can't emphasize that enough. When that interviewee leaves the room and leaves the property or leaves the video, what else do you have as an interviewer to rely on to make good decisions? If there is, in fact, a tie, interviewers like different candidates. The settlement, if you will, is based on returning to the notes. Go back to the information that you have, the documents that you've created, and determine, okay, once again, what were the standards and how did that interviewee respond? Did the responses match? Were they a good fit to the best answers? Does one seemingly top another based on the notes? Not how we felt about it, not who knows who, but mission is king. Standards are important. And then we go back to our notes. When we're making a selection decision, as hard as it is and as much time as it takes to conduct interviews and to do a really good job of conducting interviews, it is always good that if you've got a definite, yes, we really think this is a great fit, do it. If it's a situation where, you know, we could make this work, we're in that box 2 or box 3, no, but then it's a no. This is sort of along the lines of the adage, hire slow, fire fast. It's really spend time bringing the right people into the organization. Avoid hiring those toxic workers, those people who are going to push, or run roughshod over their teams, but spend the time to identify your standards, what qualities are going to fit and suit the organization, what are the best questions to get that information, what are the best answers, what do you want to hear from people who are really demonstrating and exhibiting those qualities that you've identified as important. It takes courage to make those tough decisions. It takes courage for a manager, a hiring manager, to say, you know what, I've interviewed 3 or 4 people. They were all great, and none of them is a great fit for what my team needs. And one way to build that courage and one way to remember how important and critical it is that your team sees the work that you do and the decisions that you make. They know and they work with the people whom you bring in to add to the team. They see whether those individuals you're bringing in are adding to the culture and visibly supporting it, or whether you're bringing in somebody that, you know, really is going to be tough. And your team sees that. That's one way to help you build your managerial courage and to say, you know what? It's either a great fit or we keep going on and doing some more interviews, doing some more recruiting. Remember, when you look at your team and when you look around the organization, there is not anywhere a culture neutral behavior. And bringing people into your team is one of the best ways to build culture and to do it well. Take the time, do it on purpose, do it intentionally, and build the culture that you want your organization to have. Every organization has a culture. It's best if it's the one that you intend to have and not the one that happened because you weren't paying attention.
Raylana, I want to thank you for the presentation, and now I have a few questions.
Sure.
So you talked about culture and fit, and from the perspective of hiring for culture and values. I want to also talk about to get your perspective on how do you manage your existing employees, right? very often we may come into situations where we joined a company or these people existed before we were even around. So what do you do? How do you manage existing culture and even perhaps even manage out toxic workers?
Good question. So a couple of things. First of all, I would remind us all that we can't go in two directions at the same time. Just within this week, I talked to an employee who said, so-and-so is really doing just not cutting it. He's been doing this and he's been doing that and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, how long has that been happening? Well, he's been there 1.5 years. So part of the issue is focus early on that mission. Mission is king. So you've already got a toxic employee. If it's a member of your team, you need to have some tough conversations. But first, you need to have a tough conversation with yourself, if you will, and decide, are you going to try and save that person? Do you think they can turn around and participate and drive the culture that you want or not? Because you can only go one direction or the other. And if in fact the individual is someone who can turn around, maybe they don't know that their particular habit or behavior is driving everyone else nuts because no one's ever told them. Give them the benefit of the doubt if that's the direction you're going and say, hey, privately to the individual, when this happens, when you do this, the rest of the team, I get uncomfortable. Do you know that that's happening? They may well say, you know what? Nobody's ever told me that. And you may have saved a relationship that you've spent 1.5 years tolerating. And everybody may feel a little better. On the other hand, if in fact the individual simply does not fit, and you've already tried several times to have those tough conversations, then the decision might be different. And then it may need to be a situation where a person is respectfully asked to leave the organization. Could go either way. I know that we all have blind spots. And I think it's important to do everybody the courtesy of offering that as information.
So you brought up a really good point in terms of how to manage that. So, another scenario, this person goes through the interview process, is hired on. Are there ways to start from the beginning or even manage that? Is there process for demonstrating or training to help them get up to speed on company culture? I want to touch specifically on the feedback loop, the annual performance report, the 1-year cycle.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I'm talking about. The feedback loop is too slow, right?
Yeah, so, honestly, an annual performance review, one way that I like to help people look at that is, it's like setting a GPS for where you want to go after you've already got there. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so ideally, performance should be reviewed every day. At least once a week, there should be an intentional conversation with every member of the team to say, how are we doing? What are we doing right? What should we be doing differently? And what should we keep doing? Stop, start, continue. Because that's the way that you can shape next week's behavior instead of waiting 1 year to say, golly, you did that all wrong. Yeah. So to your other question, which is a good one, when you bring someone into the organization, way too often, we just drop people in. We give them a phone and a computer and maybe an introduction to the person who sits in the next cubicle, and we walk away. So it's critical. Call it onboarding, call it the employee experience, call it whatever you want to, but it's critical to help people through the first day and week and month and 6 months to say, this is how we do things. Watch so-and-so, or connect them with a person who's in their work group or even in a different department who really exemplifies the culture that the organization wants, and say, that person can help you go far. That's the way that we do things around here. And he or she is a great example. Happens way too infrequently.
Following up on your point with regards to this whole onboarding process, what are your thoughts in terms of, not just building culture, but really understanding the organization as a whole? Do you think that job shadowing is a good way to do that?
Whether you call it onboarding, employee experience, whatever, it is critical. And it has to be balanced with, in a for-profit organization, the profit part. So, there are not-for-profits that I've worked with who do a great job of literally having someone work with a new employee for the first 6 months. And they are buddied up every day, all day, to intentionally go from department to department, meet every person they can, and do that. For-profit business probably can't do that. It is still important, though, again, in that weekly check-in with the manager, introduce them to somebody new in another department. Make sure they understand how those connections between departments can work. Start by avoiding the silos before they get built. So again, yes, it's great to find buddies or mentors or, colleagues who are willing to make the time to help a new employee come along. Doesn't have to take a lot of time, though. Introduce them to someone, intentionally take them to lunch or invite them to lunch with another department, but make those crossovers. No organization is going to be badly served by an individual coming in who can talk to somebody in every department, or who can maybe understand and learn about another department, maybe offer a new perspective. Research at the Center for Creative Leadership, CCL, in one of the Carolinas, North Carolina, I think, talks about perspective, talks about perspective as one of the hard to find qualities that you really can get some value out of. Somebody who's interested in the organization wants to learn about the other departments and the way things get connected and the way things get done. It's not a 1 day or 1 week process to bring somebody in and get them started up in an organization.
Hey, Raylana, it's Brent. Hey, thanks for taking time. What the kind of what my thinking or question is for some of these companies and employers looking to maybe reopen doors, things will be differently across industry, right? But like, how do you, understanding that there might be some employees not returning and there might be some really pressing needs to fill critical positions, how do you balance the necessity versus being more intentional with onboarding or this culture sort of advocacy work that you were talking about? What are some tips for employers that might be in the crucible a bit, but still need to make sure that they preserve some of that culture in the next couple months here?
Yeah, I think I would go back to that early slide on toxic workers. It is always going to be important to avoid hiring those toxic workers and to spend the time to not do that. I know time is critical, and I know it's hard to do good interviews and conduct enough interviews to find people. Sometimes the first person you interview is going to be a great fit. Doesn't always happen that way. But really, I would encourage employers not to get in a hurry. Identify, do the homework before that first interview. What qualities are important? What do they look like? What questions can we ask to solicit the information we need? And then what are we looking for? What are the good answers? And then not to back down and say, well, it's good enough. It's really in the long run not going to serve the people in the teams or in your colleagues group, not going to serve the team well and not going to serve the organization well to skip.
Excellent. I think the second question that I had, kind of just rolling stuff around in my mind before I have to jump off the call here, is thinking through as employees start to return either physically or start to get back in the grind, as it were, even if it's remotely. What are some of the quick ways that HR folks can think about innovating that process. And I think one of the questions I have is thinking about people who are returning after maybe 2 months off, right? It's almost like re-interviewing your incumbent employee, right? And getting people back in the swing of things. So would you suggest things like doing maybe sort of empathy interviews with employees and actually going through like a re-interview process to see how we start integrating people back into the workplace physically or virtually and back into workflows? What are some of those other ways that they can maybe innovate to retain people and get them excited about coming back to the workplace?
Great ideas, Brandon. Great question. I think honestly that through this period, I would hope that employers, team leaders, managers have been reaching out and at least tossing out information, if not expecting people to participate in calls or video chats, but connecting with people, saying, hey, we know you're out there. We still care about you. We're still planning on opening the business again. We're going to bring you back, but really keeping in touch. Missing that has been, would have been a great misfortune for the business, I think. So more of that. Video calls can be really intimidating for people, but if that's the way that the organization has decided it's going to function for a while, help people practice. Let people get on a Zoom call or whatever it is and re-meet each other, if you will. Talk about how they're doing. Talk about what's been happening and how maybe they're anxious about getting back to work or not. A colleague the other day made a great observation, and that is early on, maybe in March, people were worried about, gosh, do I have a job? Well, now people are worried about, oh, do I have to go back to my job? Whole different mindset. So let people talk about it. Don't make video calls only about staring somebody eyeball to eyeball and getting back to work. But really, again, your empathy point is a good one. Really let people just chat, talk with each other for a little while, pretend there's a coffee pot nearby or whatever, and just let people ease back into, okay, now we have work to do. Yay, we saved our jobs. Now we need to get something done.
Excellent. Thank you again for your time. I'm going to jump off and prepare for my next call. So I'll reconnect after I get done with that one too. So thank you, Raylana, so much.
Sure. Good to see you, Brent.
You too. Bye.
Well, Raylana, I want to thank you so much for this time to share your expertise and knowledge with us. And, to everybody else who's watching, if you need to reach out to Raylana, the information is in the description below. And we will see you at the next workshop. Bye.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Bye-bye.